Hello and welcome to episode 3 of our Blazing Shop or Blazor e-commerce series. Today is all about Entity Framework and SQL Server Express. So we're going to install SQL Server, or at least I will show you how to install it, download and install it, and then we will focus on Entity Framework. We have to get some Nuget packages and then implement some stuff, of course, to make this whole connection work to the SQL Server database. One thing before we start, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much to all my supporters who bought me a coffee, to all of you viewers, to all of you subscribers, all of you who write comments in the comment section below and give me feedback. This means so much to me, so please continue doing this. This helps me continue doing these videos at 5 a.m. in the morning. But I got my coffee ready. Again, if you want, please buy me a coffee, or at least hit the like button and the subscribe button to support me. It does make a difference. And the last thing, if you want to get early access to the upcoming online course, the Blazor e-commerce online course that is made out of this YouTube series here, maybe you want to subscribe to my newsletter. In that case, you would get early access and of course some more information, but I promise I won't spam you. At max, I send an email maybe once a week. And now let me take a sip of my coffee. And then we start with Entity Framework. So the very first thing, of course, is downloading SQL Server. The easiest way to get it is simply Googling for SQL Server Express, and then depending on your language settings, you should get to the correct site. And this site then looks like this. Try SQL Server on premises or in the cloud. And I would suggest you scroll a bit down, and then you either get the developer version, but you have to pay attention. You're not allowed. Jesus Christ, it's early. You are not allowed to use this in non-production environments. So I am using the Express version here, where I can, well, in essence, get SQL Server and use it even in production environments for desktop, web, and small server applications. So you should click download now, and then I think you're able to do this. Just download and install this thing. And a bit further down, you see download SQL Server Management Studio. And I think it's recommended when you click the download link as well. And I really recommend to download and install the Management Studio. And if you click this link, you should get here and download the latest one, because it's way easier to manage the database with the Management Studio. And I'm trying to start it now, so you can have a look. Just one more second. There it is. And when it's finished loading, you will see that you can simply log in with your Windows account, or you could also add any other account here to log into your server first. And then when you are connected, you see all the databases here. Now in that case, you don't see a single one, of course, because we haven't started any migration with Entity Framework, but this is the goal of this episode here. So by the end, we will see the database here. Okay, long story short, let's continue with Visual Studio and all the implementations. First, right-click the server project and then manage the Nuget packages, because we need some stuff. And the very first thing should be Entity Framework Core. There it is already. And it won't find any packages here, Entity Framework. You should go to Browse and not Installed, of course. And this is the one we are looking for, Entity Framework Core, Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. So although it's now called .NET 5, under the hood it's still Entity Framework Core here in version 5.01. So please install this thing. Okay, I accept. Just if you're wondering why we're not using Entity Framework, this is the old version here, EF6. So Entity Framework Core it is. The next one is, I've already seen it. Now it's gone. No. Let's just enter it here. Design. We need the design package. Microsoft Entity Framework Core Design. Shared design time components for Entity Framework Core tools. So install these as well. Hit OK. I accept. And then we need SQL Server. There it is. This is the one we need because it's the database provider for Microsoft SQL Server databases. Install this one and then we should be good to go. One last thing we have to install are the Entity Framework Core tools to make the migrations work. But let's see. We've already see the changes here in our Git or in our Git files. Git in the, how do you say that? The tracked files. That's the correct word. It's not opening the project file here, so let's have a look. Yeah, there it is. And now we see Entity Framework Core, Entity Framework Core Design, and also SQL Server. Okay, and then the .NET tool. When we enter .NET EF in the Package Manager console, you can see here, in my case, that we see Entity Framework Core .NET Command Line Tools version 5.01. We need this for the migrations, and to make this work, first we can uninstall it actually. So you just enter .NET tool uninstall if you have an older version, for instance, and then -- global .NET EF, and then they are gone. And if I now have a look, .NET EF not there anymore. So what you have to do is simply enter .NET tool install and then -- global and then .NET -EF, and then the tools are installed and all the preparations are done. All right, okay, so we've got SQL Server Express, we've got the Management Studio, we've got the Nuget packages, and we've got the .NET tool for Entity Framework, and all this in under 10 minutes. Isn't that great? So now we can write some code. The very first thing we need is a data context. And with that, the data context or database context, we are able to connect to our database. And we do this, of course, in the server project. And first, I'd like to add a new folder for that, which would be the data folder. And then here we create a new class. And we call this class data context. And then derive already from DB context. And we add a using directive here, Microsoft Entity Framework Core. See, there it is already. And if you hover over this, you see that a DB context instance represents a session with the database and can be used to query and save instances of your entity. So in our case, our categories and products. And the DB context is a combination of the unit of work and repository patterns. The next part is also important. Typically, you create a class that derives from DB context, what we did already, and contains DB set properties for each entity in the model. If the DB set properties have a public setter, they are automatically initialized when the instance of the derived context is created. So we could do a bunch of other stuff like here on configuring, but we will do this in the startup CS. But we will also use the on model creating for data seeding. I think that's pretty important because we have a bunch of products already. But anyways, we see the data context and they told us to add some DB sets, but first we need a constructor. So let's add the constructor here. If Visual Studio will let us. There it is. So public data context, and this thing gets a parameter which is of type db context options, data context options, and we call the base constructor with base options, and then the db sets. So the db sets will be in essence the tables that you will see in the database. So let's add a first property, which would be a db set of type category. So we will see a representation of our categories in the database. And at the using directive, Blazing Shop is shared. And we call this simply categories, because usually you would pluralize the name of the entity. And the next one already are the products, which would be called products. Okay, that's it. This is our data context. So with that, we are able to query our categories and products. And you will see this is pretty easy with Entity Framework, but we'll get to that. This is the first, well, the next preparation we had to do. So creating a data context derived by a DB context. And then we add the DB sets here. And the next thing we can already do is the connection string. Connection strings are also always a bit tricky in web API applications, I think, but let's try this. So in the app settings JSON, and you can do this in many ways. We could use the onConfiguring method in the data context class, or we can use it in the startup CS and hardcode the connection string, or we can store it here in the app settings JSON file and access it with the startup CS, because in the startup, in the configuring method, we have to register the SQL Server in essence, our data context. That's the word I was looking for. So in the configure services method of the startup CS, we will then configure the data context and register it, but first we need a connection string for that. So we add a new section called connection strings, and this is again a convention. You don't have to call it that way, but let's see. And our default connection in this case would be, now it's getting tricky, first the server, which is, in my case, it works with localhost and then SQL Express. And this thing is case insensitive, so we could just say server equals, you could, sometimes maybe you see SQL Express in uppercase. Let's do it like that. SQL Express. Then already the database name. Totally up to you. Let's call it Blazing Shop. And then trusted connection set to true. And you see there was always an error. And that should be it. So we've got our connection strings section with the default connection, and then server is localhost / SQL Express semicolon, and then database equals Blazing Shop. This is the name of our database, and then trusted connection true. And with that, let me just save the project file here. With that, now we are going to the startup CS. And here in the configure services method, now we register our data context, and we do this with services add db context. And this is our data context here. And then we've also got some options to set. Like that, and let me just add the using directive here for Blazing Shop server data. So now it knows our data context. And now regarding the options, we are using the SQL Server, so use SQL Server and add the using directive Microsoft Entity Framework core here. And now we are using this configuration member here, this property here, to access the configurations of the app settings JSON file. So configuration, and now there's a method get section, or because we use the convention by using the name connection strings, we can use the method get connection strings, because as you can see here, this is just shorthand for get section connection strings. So get connection string, and then the name of the connection string, which is default connection. Okay. All right, this should be it. So we've got our connection string registering the database context, data context with the options, use SQL Server, and this method here takes the connection string we added in the app settings JSON. All right, and now we could already run the migrations. There's one little thing we can add, and this is in the product model. We've got the decimal types here, and when we would run the migration now, Entity Framework would tell us that we may want to define the type here that should be used then in the database. And let's do that. So what we can do is we can say for the column, we say type name is decimal, and then 18.2, for instance. So we've got 2 characters after the point. What's it called? And the same, we can use the same for the original price. And we have to add some using directives here, component data annotation schema, but that should be it. Yeah. Okay, and here a bracket is missing. Okay, but this is just a side note. You don't have to do this, but Entity Framework will tell you that maybe you want to. Okay, now we're ready for migrations. So we have our models. This is very important, of course. And we have the data context, we have the registration of the data context. So let's add, or let's open the package manager console and make sure that you're in the correct folder here. So Blazing Shop Server should be the correct one. And then we can just say .NET EF migrations, and then add, and then the name of the migration, for instance, initial for the, initial migration, and just hit enter. And then it's building the project and creating some files for us. Okay, now that's interesting. Okay, and I already found the error here. There's a comma missing. And actually, when you can read, then you can see that it told us could not parse the JSON file, and the only JSON file we see here is the app settings JSON. So let's try this again by saving the app settings JSON and run the migration again. And hopefully now it works. It should start the build and hopefully it succeeds again. And then, yes, finally it's done. And you can see that you can remove this migration again. But what I wanted to show you is when the migration was successful, we get a new folder here. And the first file here is very interesting for us because you can see the name of the migration. It's called initial. And then we've got 2 methods here, the up method and the down method. Down method is pretty simple. It drops 2 tables. But the up method is interesting. It is creating tables. as you can see, the categories table here with ID, name, URL, and icon. And it also sets a primary key automatically, the ID. Again, it's just a convention. And the same stays for the products table. And the interesting thing here now is, because that's why we created our models that way, we also see the foreign key here, which means that this is connected to the categories, and we have a relationship already in our relational database. So we've got our one-to-many relationship, so one category can have many products here, and that's pretty much it. And I would say we run this migration now, and we do this with .NET EF database now, and then update. And don't worry about the update command here. If your database does not exist yet, it will create this database. Let's just run this. And Entity Framework is now using this migration file to create and update the database in essence. Great, and now we can have a look at the SQL Server Management Studio again. Refresh this, and now we see the database here. Isn't that nice? And we also see the tables, of course, and we can have a look at the categories table here. Right click and edit top 200 rows, for instance. And of course we won't see any categories. Same with the products, but we can have a look at the columns here. We also see the foreign key here. This is really, really nice. We don't have to worry about that at all. Okay, but now that's nice. We've got our database and we've got our data context, but maybe we want to seed some data now. So we've got some categories and products to start in the database, and of course we will do that and copy all our categories and products we already added to the project to the database then. And to do that, we go back to the data context, and there's this beautiful method called onModelCreating, which we can override. So let's say protected override void onModelCreating. We need the model builder here. Model builder, there it is. That's the one. Okay, now for the categories, let's start with the categories. We say model builder, model builder entity, and then category, and then we use the method has data, and with has data we can simply set all the data that should be added to the database, and we've got them already in our service. There it is, and we just need these here. Let's go back, paste them here, and that should be it. So with that, we seed our first three categories: books, electronics, and video games, and we do exactly the same for the products. So model builder entity products, and then has data like that, and then let's just copy and paste the products here from our product service. There they are. All right. Okay. These are the products. All right. And with that, we run just another migration. So we go to the package manager console and say .NET EF migrations and seeding maybe. have a look at the created files now. Seeding, and here you can see now in the up method, the insert data method is called a bunch of times for the categories and for the products. And the down method removes all these again. Yep, exciting. And then with .NET EF database update, we add them to our database. And when this is done, let's have a look. In the SQL Server Management Studio again, let's just refresh this. And here, let's close this. And there are our categories. Nice. And regarding the products, we see our products here. And here you can see the type again, decimal 18.2. Otherwise, it could be that it's not using the 2 here, just setting it to 0 or to 4 or whatever. But I think by default it's 18 and 2. Anyways, Entity Framework would give you a warning or something like that, so just set the attribute and you're good to go. Okay, we've got our projects and categories, and the last thing now is to, well, access these things from the database, I guess, and not using our mock or hard-coded categories and products here. So let's remove the categories and also remove the products from the product service. Like that, and then use the database categories and products. So first the categories. So first we add the constructor. You already know this. We've got our public category service now, and we add the data context here. Call this context. We have to add the using directive and also initialize this field. Add an underscore. Do this here as well. And then we simply say, we have to set the context, and then we simply say await context categories, and then maybe to list async, add another using directive, and we're done. So now we've got our categories, and in essence we do the same down here. Instead of categories, we access await context categories, call first or default async, and we're done. Pretty easy, right? So we did all the preparations to just access the context then, and from that we get the categories, and these are all the entities that are in the table, in the database table, and we can do all the calls we want to do, or everything we did before. So all the link statements here, or the link methods, we can do all these with the categories from the database, of course. When we are creating and updating entities, that's different, of course. We have to call a method called save changes async, for instance, but that's for another episode. So first we're done with the categories here, and now we do exactly the same with the products. So we already got the constructor here, so we just inject the data context. Almost context. Data, and initialize the fields. Okay, and now we say again await context products to list async. That's it. And then we say products first or default async, and here the same await context products where to list async. Nice. And I think the warnings, yeah, we have no warnings anymore. Okay, this should be it. We've got the category methods covered, the products methods are covered, and then I would say we save everything and maybe build this just to be sure, and then run it again. So .NET watch run, and then let's see if we get the products and the categories. Okay, there it is on my other screen. Let's open the console and reload this. So we've got our products and categories already. Now they look exactly the same, so how would you know that these are really from the database? Well, maybe let's just add a category to test this and fix this error here. Okay, now this is really interesting. We see here this error, a possible object cycle was detected. And this is actually a little design flaw. When you look at the category model here now, or let's go to the product service first, because what happened here was we were calling the get products by category method, and this thing then goes to the category service and the model, of course, and then we get the category model here, and as you can see we have a list of products here, and the product then again has a link to the category, and the category then again has a list of products, and the products have a link to the category, and so on. So there is really a cycle, and this was not a problem until we added this to the database. So the easiest fix would be to just remove the products list here, because a relationship is already defined in the product by using the category and the category ID. Now the interesting part would be what happens to our migration when we remove this here. Let's see. So let's stop the application and run another migration. Products removed from category model. So it's starting to build. And loss of data, okay. Let's have a look at the migration file. Update data. So this is just the seeding, I guess. But nothing happens to the tables. So that's fine. That's absolutely fine. So let's just run this. That was the wrong one. EF database update. Alright, and now let's run the application again, and the error should be gone. Okay, there it is again. Let's open the console. Let's reload this again. We see the category and products call, and now we are able to filter our products by their categories. We can access the single products. This is nice. And then what I actually wanted to do is just add another category to the database manually. So here in the Management Studio, let's edit the top 200 rows, and let's add something like music. URL is music, and I think this is musical note. Let's reload. There's already our category. The icon is wrong. There's a dash missing. So we can edit this. Musical. Note like that. And maybe now reload this. There's the music. Nice. But we see no products here. So maybe let's just add one product. Products. So we already got them here, right? Yep. Music. Okay, let's see. Okay, maybe I've got one. I pretty much like Electric Light Orchestra, listening to it lately. And they've got an album called All Over the World, which is the very best of ELO. And I've got an image here. So maybe this works. And let's say it costs $9.99. Original price is null. Funny that this is false by default now. I haven't seen that before. So we should maybe filter this in one of the next episodes. So this should be true. Deleted should be false. Category now is 4, of course. And date created is not set by default. So this is now 2020. And what do we have? The 21st. Ah, come on. So there are some things we can fix here. But now let's have a look. Music. There it is. Nice. So great. Works so fast. Yep. Okay, so this works. I think we are already done. Not that long this time. But we've got entity framework now. We've got our database. And the data context. Getting the data from the database. This works just fine. Okay, I will commit this and then you see the codes in the GitHub repository. If you have any questions, feel free to write them down in the comments. Maybe there are new questions now because of this episode. And in the next episodes, I think we can finally add some more features to our e-commerce application, because now we've got the full stack covered. You can also call it the walking skeleton, because we've got the front end, we've got the web services, we've got the database, so we don't have to use any kind of mock data in the services. I really don't like this. This is nice for the start, but then I would like to store all these things persistently in the database. And we did this now with this episode. This is great. Thank you very much again to all my supporters who bought me a coffee. Maybe you want to do this too. And thank you very much for liking and subscribing, of course. And maybe you want to also subscribe to my newsletter to get early access to the upcoming online course, which will be not that chaotic, I guess. The episodes here are kind of freestyle. It could be also a live show, but I'm doing this pretty early in the morning, so I don't know. Do you want to see me doing this live? Tell me that as well in the comments. Maybe we can find a time to do this. And apart from that, if you already want to dive a bit deeper into Blazor WebAssembly, maybe you want to have a look at the Blazor WebAssembly full stack bootcamp. Either here on YouTube, there's a 2-hour preview. Just check out the info card or the link in the video description, of course. Or you can check out the course with the link on Udemy already, because there you will build a classic online browser game with lots and lots of stuff regarding Blazor WebAssembly and also the web services, of course. But the focus is on Blazor WebAssembly. And in there, as I already said, we create a browser game with units that fight against each other. So users can register with JSON Web Tokens. We're using JSON Web Tokens for authentication. You build your army and then you fight against other users with your army and climb the leaderboard to become the best warrior of them all. So if you want, please have a look. And apart from that, enjoy the next days. And thank you very much for watching. I see you next time. Take care.